So let's dive in and start
Okay.
with primary versus investment homes.
Okay.
So what is the primary difference in money out of a buyer's pocket when it comes to buying a home that's going to be a primary residence versus if you're purchasing a property strictly to be a investment property?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. It's a good question for people to understand, especially when it comes to that out of pocket cost, because it's so crucial to understand that there's a lot more money that comes down with an investment property. And I think that it's great for people to have goals to have it in investment property, but it is a little bit more difficult in that realm. With a primary residence, the lowest down payment that you need is a 3%. So
Hmm.
anywhere from 3 to 5% is the lowest down payment just for a regular primary residence, the residence that you're going to be living in.
Hmm.
Now, with an investment property, it's a little bit different. You're looking at 15, 20% down. A lot of investors will go to 15% down, but there are some of those investors that only require 20% down. So it's quite the difference when you're looking at a $400,000 house from 5% to 20%. Um, I think that typically rates are a little bit higher with investment properties because it's higher risk to the lender. So this
Right.
isn't a home that you're going to be living in, right? This isn't a home that you're going to be in every single day, making sure that it's still standing and things are going. These are, you're not going to know how these investment properties are being treated by the renters.
Yeah.
So with that too, a lot of times it has a lot of more restricted guidelines in the mortgage process too. Um, a big thing that people don't understand too, and this is something so crucial to understand, is there's a word called reserves in our industry. In reserves, you don't
Yeah.
just need a down payment and you don't just need your closing costs, but for an investment property, typically they like to see you have 6 months of home payment, that whatever the payment's going to be for your investment property, they like to see you have an additional 6 months of that payment in an account to make sure that you can continue making that payment. Really, it's to make sure that if there's a time where your house is not occupied by a
Vacant.
borrower, something like, or by a, sorry, not a borrower, a renter,
Mhm.
um, that you have the funds to make sure that
Right,
that
they need
monthly
to see the
payment's going
proof
to
is in
be
the pudding and see the bank
exactly.
account bank statements that, hey, you're not just, after
Yeah,
this, you're not going to be cleared out in cash. They want to make sure that they're a strong buyer. So, okay. And
exactly.
so
Yeah,
primary difference is, just that mainly that down payment. And then, like you said, having more reserves versus, maybe
yeah,
primary properties, they don't necessarily require it. Although we
yeah,
recommend that you have those reserves,
yeah,
ultimately it's up to the buyer versus when you're doing an investment, it's really a
yeah.
requirement from
And
the
it's not
lender.
a hard guideline when it
Right.
comes to a primary residence. So,
And then,
um,
so one of the ways, I want to clarify too for anybody that's watching or listening, one of the ways that people get around that sort of investment or the house hack, right, is where people buy it as a primary residence and you have to live in it for 2 years and then you're able to rent that out, correct?
correct.
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
correct. And you can do that. And I know we're going to get a little bit into capital gains a little bit later in the conversation. Um, but ultimately it does help. There's no hard guideline on how long you have to live in the property before you can make it an investment. Like if you live in your primary residence for a year and then circumstances change and you're ready to rent that out, you can. Really what it comes down to is if you live in it for 2 years
you
and
avoid
then
the
you go to try to
taxes.
sell it or something, then you're not going to have to pay that capital gains. But I know we're going to get into that a little bit later. But yeah, that you're right in that sense. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then let's just go straight into capital gains then and talk actually a
Okay.
little bit about that. So, tell us what the biggest myth is with capital gains and how people can avoid paying them when they sell their property or when they are, I guess, purchasing their property.
Yeah.
Because on our end, we deal with capital gains primarily in the selling, right? Like people
Mm-hmm.
sometimes will ask us, hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z, but I want to pay the least amount in capital gains. So on my end of things, it's obviously we always want to recommend that people consult with their attorney or their CPA to
Yes.
make sure, like again, we are not legal
No,
accountant,
I handle
CPA.
finances, but not that kind of
Yes,
finances.
yes, it is different. So I just want to clarify: we are not CPAs. We are not
Yeah.
offering like tax advice. However, like I said, kind of the hack around it is kind of like that 2-year rule that we talk about in avoiding
Yeah.
it. And then tell us what the so for single individuals versus married individuals, there's actually a different threshold for
Mhm.
those capital gains taxes. Do you want to walk us through, like, I don't know, capital gains for dummies 101, or like
Yeah, and
the biggest questions you get around capital gains on?
I definitely can hit on this to a certain extent. I definitely don't want to lead people down the path, like you said, of trying
Consult with
to
someone.
answer some of these questions that are out of my realm. But as far as capital gains, like you did nail it. Like if you buy a home and you're, let's just say you're trying to flip it quick, or not even flip it quick, but you found a fixer upper home that you know is in a good area that you're going to live in for a little while. I would definitely suggest living in it for 2 years, because if you
Mhm.
do live in it for those 2 years, 2 full years,
Yep.
and
From the
there's
date
those,
of closing on the loan
yep, yep,
to, yep.
to when you go to sell, all of that equity that you gain. So let's just say you have $100,000 that you're gonna net from the sale of your home. You're not gonna have to pay capital gains on that. So you're not gonna have to give, a pretty large chunk,
Mhm.
back for remodeling that home and getting that equity. So that's the beauty, is it is only 2 years. It's really not that long. And if you're like anything like me and you're remodeling a home, it's going to take you 2 years,
Yeah.
maybe longer.
So
But
So now the other thing is with capital gains taxes, again, we are not CPAs. But tell us about the thresholds, right? Because people do sometimes worry, if they have so much equity in their home and they go to sell, they
Mhm.
are taxed on it regardless of how long they've lived in the home, if that net dollar amount is certain over a certain amount. So do you want to tell
Yeah.
us what the
Uh,
single and what the couple, I mean, I know, but
Yeah, and correct me
tell
if
us
I'm
about that.
wrong, because I think I know. I'm pretty sure I know, but correct me if I'm wrong. But I think for single, it's 100 or
Good.
250.
Yep.
250 for single and 500 for married couples. So it's like,
Yep.
if you're married and you're getting ready to net 550,000 from the sale of your house, from my understanding is that everything over that 500,
You
that
get
50,000 is what you're going to be taxed on to pay that capital gains tax.
Yep.
So something to keep
That's
in
also my
mind.
understanding. So that's a
Yeah,
big one, I think, that we get,
huge.
both of us, I think, on either ends, right? Is because people are really aware of it, especially nowadays with social media, and again,
Yeah,
not only misinformation, but just so much information being inundated when people are looking to buy or looking to sell or looking at investment properties. Capital gains is something that comes up a lot, and I think the
yeah,
biggest misconception that I see with it is that people think that once you hit 500, once you hit your cap, right? So if you're single and you're selling and you're making over 250, or you're a
yeah.
married couple and you're selling, you're making over $500,000, again, in your net proceeds, what's going in your bank account,
Net. Yep,
people
yep,
think that you have to pay capital gains on all that money, and that is not correct. Like what you said, it's
yep,
actually just that difference. So if you're netting 225,000, you're going to get, as a single, you're going to get taxed that capital gains amount, whatever that capital gains tax amount is, on just that $25,000, not the full 250.
yep.
Right? Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yep.
So yeah, so that's a big one, I think, for people. Let's see, what other fun things. So one fun thing, let's skip divorce and death right now.
I
Let's
say
go.
we did want to talk about recasting, which I know is can be big, and I'm actually going through one right now. So I think it would
Yeah.
be good to touch on that
I
too.
also have one right now that we're planning on recasting alone. So let's talk
Yeah.
about that. And so what is recasting alone? When is it appropriate? And
Hmm.
why are people doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. I like it as far as like what it is. Recasting alone, like it's kind of recasting is kind of an interesting word for just like a making a large lump sum payment.